Welcome to the UIAAA Connection podcast. Hometown Ticketing is proud to be the exclusive sponsor of the UIAAA Connection podcast and to provide schools nationwide with the best options for digital ticketing for their events. Visit their website at hometownticketing.com to learn how they can make digital ticketing possible and simple at your school. Thank you to Hometown Ticketing for their exclusive sponsorship of the UIAAA Connection podcast.
Welcome back to another edition of the UIAAA Connection. I'm your host, Mark Hutch Hunter. Today, we are pleased to have Mark VanWagoner, legal counsel for the Utah High School Activity Association, as our guest. Welcome to the podcast, Mark.
Well, thank you, Mark. It's good to be here. We've talked about this for, I don't know, quite a while. Not as long as we've talked about my taking you to play golf, but we've talked.
Yeah, exactly right. And I'll keep reminding you of that.
Do that during the podcast, remind me.
Yes. Let's have you start out by sharing with our audience here in Utah and across the nation where you grew up, your first job, your high school sports involvement, possibly where you went to college. And we want to spend a little bit of time talking about that.
Sure. My family is from the Heber Valley. My great ancestors settled in Midway. My parents' immediate family, my dad's immediate family, was from Midway. His father died in the pandemic of 1919, and the family kind of closed ranks, and they began to do work there together. He went to the war and came back and stayed in Midway. My mother's from Duchesne.
Okay, hang on a second. So let me interrupt you. So since I have a place near Midway, where in Midway was your homestead, where you brought up?
Well, it would have been just off Center. Well, I can't remember. I don't remember the streets. You come in and then there's the, as you come into town from Heber, there's the River Road. You can take a right and go down by Memorial Hill. And then maybe 2 or 3 blocks down would have been where the family home was, but a block east. So it was as you came into town. So where are you in Charleston? Are you one of those Charleston?
No,
guys?
we have a family place in Interlochen, which is just north of Midway, up on the hill.
Yeah, sure.
So your place is near I think it's changed hands, the Tarahumara restaurant, which is apparently changed hands right there on the main street as you pull in.
Yeah, but it's off the main street. It was a ranch. My grandfather was a rancher, and then his oldest son took that over. My dad went in the Army. My dad was an amazing musician. He won every award that was possible in high school, and he was given a scholarship to play woodwinds at BYU. He went in the Army. When he came back, he was in business with his brothers. He went out to Duchesne to teach music for a period of time. Met my mother in Duchesne, the big city of Duchesne. Okay. And she, as I've told the folks down south, she attended Wasatch Academy. And so I have a soft spot for Wasatch Academy. They married and lived first in Midway, and then, actually, he went in the Army after they were married. I've got it a little bit backward. But when he came back, they lived in Midway, and the first house I lived in that I can even recall was in Midway, and then they moved to Heber. They built a house there that I lived in until I left home, and that my parents lived in until they both died. So it was on 3rd East in Heber. The thing I liked about, I believe I grew up in the most glorious possible time in Heber. There was an enormous amount of freedom. Nobody knew where you were. It's almost as if you were a god, that people couldn't find you. Now people can find you everywhere. Your parents know where you are. Everyone's out. I don't know what my life would have been like with that. But our parents all trusted us. We could take off for the weekend on horses take a 22 and ride up into the mountains, and nobody worried that we were going to shoot each other or shoot someone or come and shoot up a school. It was a very trusting place. It was a really good environment. And I had some great friends. Grade school was always fun. I was a precocious student, and I thought that school was easy, and so I was sort of as you might have guessed, I tended to mouth off in school. I still tend to
Just
mouth
a little
off.
bit.
It was someone once told me, well, you have great facility for language, and I never quite thought of it as in a positive sense, although it really was positive. It's how I ended up doing what I'm doing and how I got to do it. But I was athletic. I played all the sports that we played when we were kids. We'd play tackle football without any pads or anything in somebody's backyard or downtown. And then when we got to be older and we were in high school, we all played together. I've put it this way. I was a really good baseball player. I played football until I was too hurt. And I played basketball until they caught me. And then that was kind of the end of basketball for me. I enjoyed it. To this day, I still play golf with 3 of the kids I played high school sports with. 2 of them from the time I was in kindergarten, Dave Todd and Mike Lindsay, and a third, Tom Keller, who moved in and we all played together. He moved in when we were sophomores. And the thing I liked most was the friendship. In those days, it was A and B. And
Yes.
it was unlikely that, unless you had an exceptional team in Heber, you weren't going to win the state title in Class B, because Class B went up to 500 students and we had 250 or 300. And generally it was Judge Memorial who won everything.
Yes.
So, but in my senior year, we had a really good football team and we thought they'd win, but they ended up not winning. The thing that I liked about high school and the smallness of it for me was that it gave me an opportunity to do a lot of things, which I did. I did music, I did drama, I did sports, I did debate. I formed a folk trio when I was in high school with John, Ashley, and John. And
we called them the Midway Trio to compete with the Kingston Trio.
Well, we competed with the Kingston Trio, but they didn't know it. It was called the Valley Man because we were from the Valley, from Heber Valley. But we had a lot of fun doing that. They were great friends, and we still, we performed at class reunions in the last 10 years, even though we could barely make it up on the stage, and that was a wonderful experience.
Well, let's clarify what year you graduated from Wasatch.
I graduated in 1965. I found that I had a facility for debate, and in part I was given the smartest and most beautiful girl in high school, Margaret Turner, as my debate partner. And we won a lot of debate tournaments all over. And when I was a senior, she was a year older, debating with a friend, Kenny, Wasatch High School won the state championship, which was, for me, it's a big deal. We did it. So I didn't get a ring. They didn't give rings to debaters. They gave kind of snide smiles to debaters,
I understand that, having been a debate champion 2 out of 3 years when I was at Highland.
Well, there you go. The thing I liked was when we would come down to Highland to debate at Highland, we came from Heber, and nobody thought we could probably even speak. It was hilarious. We'd go in to debate, and we were given sort of the look that you just gave me, that you're from Highland, and we would win, and they couldn't figure it out. It was fun and bizarre at the same time, because at first we didn't think we'd win either, and then we ended up doing it. because Highland was at that time in 1965 quite a powerhouse of everything, including football and basketball and
yes.
all kinds of things.
Because Highland
Yeah.
would have been maybe what, 6, 7 years old. I think my sister may have been in the first or second graduating class in 62.
Yeah,
I had another one in 64. So
yeah. So what year did you graduate?
I graduated in 71. And like I say, debate
Okay,
even
yeah,
then,
yeah,
I assume it was the same coach. Hugh Rush was our
Yeah,
coach at
I
Highland.
know,
I think
yeah.
he'd been there for quite a long time
Yeah.
and had quite a bit of success. So that's impressive that you won.
Well, they had good debaters. I'm not saying they didn't. They had very good debaters, and all of our debates with them were hotly contested. And when we won, we felt pretty good about the kids coming from the, just coming out of the milking barns, which of course wasn't true at all, but that was sort of what we thought. Let's see. You
talk about your mentors while you're thinking
in high school. Okay, let me in high school.
In high school or professionally, or even once you came to work for the UHSAA, people that had an influence on you.
Well,
besides me.
Besides, well, you've had a huge influence on me. I'm surprised if we had been in class together, we would never have graduated, because all we ever do is talk during the meetings.
There you
go. Obviously, my parents. My dad was a professional musician and understood what it took to do things, and he always encouraged me, gave me lots of opportunities. Wherever he could let me play the clarinet with him, he did. And I played all over, everywhere, and did all kinds of things. And that gave me confidence that I could do other things. My mom was incredibly loyal. I had one coach, Dan Wright. I don't know if you have heard his name, but Dan was a coach of all kinds of things. But from the time I was in the 7th grade onward, he was incredibly good to me and let me do a lot of things. And even though I don't think he taught me a lot of technical mechanics about sports, he taught me a lot about putting effort into it. He was a really good guy. My dad was a teacher in the high school. Another teacher, which you're going to laugh when I tell you this, it was my seminary teacher. Don't laugh, stop laughing. Art Bassett was a great influence because he sort of taught me about life. In college, I had a professor's name is Jay Butler, who gave me a wide view of the world. What could happen if I went to law school, and how those things would be. When I was a lawyer and I was practicing in California, one of my good friends and mentor was a lawyer named Pat Lynch, who was probably the finest lawyer in the country at the time. So I mean, I was lucky to do that. Now I've jumped ahead of when I got my position with the association.
Well, let's put that on hold for a second.
Okay, all right. Do you want me to talk about law school, or what do you want to do?
What I want to know is, first of all, what's your biggest failure and what did you learn from it? When I worked in California, in a big firm in California, and came back here. And at some point when I was back here, I decided I'd start my own law firm, which I did with a partner. And then we had several other people with us. And it was a really good law firm. We were a boutique litigation firm, and we had good clients, and we operated on the theory of what do the lawyers want and why can't they have it, which I think may have been too generous, but we did it anyway. We had a reversal, and some of it had to do with a betrayal of someone that I thought was my best friend. And what I learned from that might not be what you think I learned from it, but what I learned from that was that I was still prepared in the future to be betrayed by someone I had misjudged, rather than interact with people and distrust them. And so I didn't, change the way I looked at people. I didn't become more suspicious of everything everybody did.
although that might have been better. But that's not what I did. So that's what I learned from it, and that's what it was.
Okay, so my second, well, not my second, but another question is, so you grew up in Wasatch County, you grew up in the Heber Valley.
Right.
And I'm wondering to myself, of course, it's a lot different now, but how does a kid who plays all sports, hung out with his kids, went out on horses in the weekend with guns, etc., played the clarinet, how does that kid get to Duke University? Because I would bet that there's not a whole lot of graduates of Duke that are residents of the Heber Valley. I'm just guessing, but tell us about that journey.
Well, I had known about Duke University and had followed their basketball team in the 60s because they were pretty good in the 60s and they got to the finals because one of my dad's high school classmates taught in the Duke Medical School. So he used to talk to me about it. But I had no thought that I would ever go to Duke University, ever. And you're right. I mean, it's how do you get from Wasatch High School to Duke University? Well, some of it had to do with the fact that I went to BYU on a debate scholarship and was noticed by people. But it also had to do with the fact that I was lucky that my brain was ordered in a certain way. That is to say, that I did really, really well on the law school admission test. So I had good grades and I had a whiz-bang law school admission test score. And I was told, why don't you apply to Duke? So I did. And the dean of admissions came out to BYU and interviewed me. And a little while later, they gave me an offer. And that was before my LSAT came in. And when the LSAT came in, they gave me a scholarship. So I not only somehow magically managed to go from Heber to Duke, I went there on a full scholarship.
And you got them to pay for it.
That's right. They paid for it. And it was a, God, what a marvelous experience. I was, the professors were wonderful. They taught me in the way that you'd want to be taught. I was given a classic legal education. But I had to compete there against kids who were really bright from all over the country. Which I did, and I competed pretty well, I think. And of course, you'd have to know that I would win the moot court competition, which I did, which was hilarious. Yes. But so my facility came through once again, but I loved it. Their basketball team when I was there sucked. Coach K didn't come until I had graduated. But I've enjoyed being able to follow him. And I loved my time there. I did. I thought it was wonderful. I even got to write the search and seizure manual for the Durham City Police Department. Really? Which may have led to some unfortunate events. I don't know. I never followed up on it.
Tell me if the Cameron Indoor Arena was, because I know there was an early part of the 60s, they were good. When you're there, they were kind of not so good. And then Coach K came. And so was it still a hot ticket item? Was it still pretty full?
No, it was easy to get in. And in fact, it was located across the street and through some woods from the law school. And we would go over there at noon and play pickup basketball, like 4-on-4. And we could play on Cameron Indoor on the floor of the court. So I played there, and I actually played there with the president of BYU, Cecil Samuelson, who was there doing some postgraduate study in the medical school. We laugh about it all the time about how we went over there and got to play on the floor. So, but No, it wasn't. It wasn't as crowded. You might get a crowd for the Carolina game,
Hmm.
but that was about it. And it just really was not very exciting.
Well, I've been to the campus. It was probably, ooh, probably 18 years ago.
Yeah.
And obviously we got a tour of the Cameron Indoor. We
Yeah.
saw where the law school was. We saw the building that Coach K built, funded by all of his players in the NBA, all
Yeah,
that type
for
of thing. It's a
sure.
very, very historic looking campus, so very astute, I thought.
Well,
And
I
a
have to
stadium.
I confess I've not been back since I left, but I think I'm going to go this year and go to a game. It is a beautiful spot. It really is.
All right, so let's now go from Duke and let's go back to the previous point. So you're a graduate of Duke University, probably fairly high in the class. You go to California, you practice law there, a big firm. It's not for you. You come back to Utah, you make your own firm, and all of a sudden, somewhere in this time frame, they want someone to be the legal counsel for the UHSAA. And so how does that drop in your lap? Did you apply?
Well,
You heard about it? Someone come after you?
that happened before I went to California, because when I graduated, I came to Salt Lake and worked in a law firm briefly here before I decided I'd go to California.
Okay, so you graduate from Duke then in what year?
74.
Okay.
And then in September of 1974, I get a phone call from the man who had been the principal of my high school at Wasatch High School, Marion Tree,
Okay.
whom I'd known since I was a child.
Sure.
And he said, "Hey, we need a lawyer. I'm the executive director of the Activities Association. You want to be our lawyer?" And I said, "Sure." And that's how it started. And then, not too long thereafter, he called me on the phone and said, "We've got an issue with a student who wants to have a fifth year of eligibility." The things were the same, Mark, as they are today. And he said, there's a request for a temporary restraining order. Can you meet me? And I can't remember where it was exactly, but can you meet me and handle this? And I said, sure. So I got a couple of cases and met him, went in and saw the judge and told the judge that high school sports were a privilege, not a right, and that if you didn't comply with the rules, you didn't get to play. That was it. And the judge looked at the other lawyer. He said, "Why are you here? How could you possibly be here?" So I walked out and I told Marion, and this is my dog. I walked out and I told Marion what happened, and he laughed. "You go. And he laughed. He said, "Well, you see those guys over there?" And I looked down the hall, and they were some teachers or maybe some principals. And he said, "While you were in there, they came to me and said, 'Isn't he a little young to be doing this?'"
Oh,
And so, Mark, I've now gone from "isn't he too young to do this"
well,
to
wait a minute. You've got to be close to what? 28,
27.
29 by that time.
I was 27.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was 27. But I was a young 27. I was, yeah. So that's how it started. And I have
So you've been the lead counsel since for
1974,
20. So you're talking
almost 50 years.
47 years.
Yeah. Almost 50 years.
That's impressive.
It's been it's a sweet ride.
What's the I don't want to say the most famous case, but what case maybe do you think that you've had that was the most problematic? Maybe that's the best way to say it. Or what case did you have that actually may have had a chance to win? Because I don't believe any of them have been.
No,
successful.
nobody's won. We've been extremely lucky with we are whatever the number is in O. There were a couple of high-profile players that we declared ineligible for the year, and they were players that were high quality and went on to fairly serious careers in college, and some even played on after that. And even I thought in those cases, there was some possibility that the judge might decide, contrary to what the law might be, that it just was unfair to take a year away from this kid who was such a competitor. The judges didn't, but it was a concern to me that might happen. It's nobody relishes the idea that somebody has to sit out, but we've said this before and we've said it in meetings, and that is we have rules and people try to do their very best to beat them,
Yes.
and to move around and to be at a different school, when the reality is, and it's certainly more so now than it used to be. I mean, in the late 70s and early 80s, it might have been important where you played as to whether a college coach would see you play.
Mm-hmm.
But now, I don't think any player of football or basketball, well, maybe a little in football, but certainly not basketball, and certainly not the other sports, is recruited out of high school. They are recruited from the camps they go to, for the Las Vegas tournaments. I mean, it's true of baseball. They're traveling teams in baseball. I think the only thing about football, and a lot of those players are recruited out of the 7-on-7 things that the coaches go to. And one of the reasons is that the coaches they're busy. They can't go out and look. So now they can look at tape because tape is easy to get to them. It's just easier. And
You've
so
got all
moving
those
around,
recruiting services and that type of
yeah,
thing.
yeah. Moving around is not as important as it once was. Although now with name, image, and likeness, maybe kids will want to transfer because they'll get paid by somebody at the new school. You just don't know. It's bizarre.
That's a Pandora's box that
Isn't it? It really is.
It's yet to be. So let me ask you this that just came to mind now. So you've been over 45 years and on different sides. I can remember being in hearings on your side, and I can remember being in hearings on a different side representing students or students that wanted to come.
For sure.
And how does that because how do I say this so it sounds nice? I'm not sure that you're as friendly with all the people that may have been in those hearings that may not want to see you again. Does that make sense? I mean, obviously we get along and we understand the way it works.
No, it does make sense. And some people are angry if they don't get the decision they want. I mean, I'm a lawyer, so I don't always get the decisions I want out of judges. I'm not necessarily angry, but I can be disappointed. I try to be nice to everybody who's nice to the panel. I don't know, for the people who are watching this, the decisions are made by a 3-person panel, and the panel knows, has no axe to grind. It is one of the great joys of my life to work with the people in the association, because they are honest and forthright and they want to do the right thing with regard to the student and the rules. But sometimes, people take a different point of view. I'm a little abrupt with coaches who, when on the spot, will say, "Hey, I know these people are being recruited." And you may have been there a couple of times. I've said to them, there's recruiting. I want you to tell me right now on the record who's been recruited and by whom.
Exactly.
Well, it gets very, very quiet when I do that, because sometimes it's just not the case. There was a period of time when Evan Excel, what a wonderful man he is, isn't he? When Evan Excel was the executive director, in which he was pilloried supposedly for having animus against certain players. Not true. And in fact, Evan is one of the reasons that the association has such a fair system of adjudication. When Evan came aboard, we tried to find a way to make certain that all of the adjudications were done in a way that was legal and transparent. And I think we did that. We've recorded them all. We've made it clear what happens. Well, we still don't have all of them, but we make it clear
Right.
what happens in the hearing. And he was someone who brought that about. And Rob Cuff has continued it. Rob's a wonderful guy himself doing it.
Let me ask you this. And so what do you think maybe 2 or 3 of the biggest successes you've had as being the attorney for the UHSAA? Possibly, and I know people maybe get the wrong idea that this girls' football suit is being appealed up to a higher level. But and of course you're speaking to someone who coached professional women's football for 4 years with the Utah Falcons. And I'm here to tell you that the bigger districts in the state would be lucky to field a team. And so you maybe 4 or 5 of the biggest districts field a team. That maybe gives you 5 teams. I don't know what kind of experience that's going to be for young ladies. But anyway, back to the question. What are maybe 1 or 2 of the biggest successes you've had in your
well,
time
that case was as high profile as we've ever had. We've never had a month-long trial in federal court, except in that case. And it was an important case for several reasons. First of all, it was important because the association was able, during the negotiations with the districts and others involved, the Superintendent's Association, to step forward and be the entity that would try to do the very best to provide additional sports for girls. And so we created a system by which sports could be identified and nurtured to see if they could in fact become sports that girls could participate statewide, in which you could have a state championship. So I think
wrestling being an example.
Yeah, wrestling is a perfect example. We've now done. Have we done it, or is it still up to be done? But it's going to be done. Competitive cheer, but that really wasn't something you had to seek out. I mean, it was something that could have gone forward perhaps sooner, but the people who were doing cheer sort of held on to it and didn't necessarily want it to happen.
Right.
And I think that's important. So we've dealt. We are the vanguard for the schools and the districts with regard to trying to find ways to make sure that we add sports for purposes of Title IX. The second thing that I thought was important in that case was that we were able to demonstrate the clarity with which a sport is treated. That one of the allegations was that people just, that men in the association were discriminating against girls. Well, there was never any evidence of that. And in fact, that's what the judge concluded at the end, that there was no discrimination, and there hasn't been. I realized that the other side had to allege that in order to keep the case going. But I think the reputation of the association emerged from that case unsullied in any manner whatsoever. And, in fairness, it was an expensive case.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean.
I know exactly what you mean. So let me ask you, from your perspective as a lawyer in 45 years, how is the job of today's high school athletic director different than when you first started for the association? And I'm not even sure when you started for the association if schools actually had athletic directors, if it wasn't just a responsibility of the principal or the vice principal.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. Well, it's unrecognizable. the effort, the general public does not appreciate the enormous effort that is required by a school to organize and produce the sports that fans and parents go to on a regular basis, without interruption, without disturbance, without having to postpone them. It's an enormous undertaking. Just in one school, it would be enormous, but it's done in all the schools across the state. And it's done by coordination. The association doesn't do that. And I'm talking about what the ADs and the others in the schools do. They are certain that there are people there to monitor the crowds, to be sure that the students are safe, to be sure the lights are on, to be sure that everything is scheduled appropriately, to make it clear that the girls don't play at noon, and so the boys play at 7:30. To see that there are no cheaters, kids that shouldn't be playing. I mean, they do literally. They do this. They do all that. They arrange for buses. They get people there. They arrange for equipment. It is an enormous undertaking, and the ADs do that. They are in charge of that, and they do it very well. And you're the head AD, but I don't think people really understand how hard that is to do, and it is amazingly hard. And you do a great job, Mark.
Well, thank you. That's well said. Let me go in a different direction before we wind up with a couple of 2 or 3 questions.
Okay,
So
sure.
I understand that you're not only an attorney, but at one time or another, or still a professional sports owner. So let's talk about that for a minute.
Well, I did. Yeah, let me bring this up. I won Tribune's No Champs with tennis once.
Yeah.
But I owned part of I was a part owner of the Salt Lake Trappers. And then from there, the St. Paul Saints and a number of other teams. And
I've been to a St. Paul Saints game.
Well, there you go.
5 years ago.
Yeah. Well, I'm out of it now. So, but it's an interesting thing. Do they still have the pig come out and bring the balls to the umpire?
Yeah, they had, when I was there, the fellow that owned it was the son of the, so this is what, 5 years ago. He's got to be the son. Remember the owner of the White Sox and had
no. This kid, he did Disco Demolition Night. And so he kind of poisoned the well for him ever to do anything in major.
Yeah, but he now owns the.
Well, he's one of the owners. He's one of the owners. He's not the only one. Yeah, no, it was a fun thing. But I got to know Bill Murray because he would come to the games, and I spent some time with him. A remarkable person. He's very.
Is he as funny in person?
Yeah.
Or is he funnier?
Well, I don't. He's pretty funny. He's really quick, unbelievably quick, but very generous with his time. People will stop him anywhere, and he'll pose with them. He doesn't, slink away.
Yeah.
But if you go to dinner with him, you have to sneak him in and put him in the middle of all of you so that nobody can get to him.
Sure.
And not tell anyone. The thing about Bill that I think being with Bill that's interesting is that people who don't know him very well think that everything he says is supposed to be funny. And it's not. He's not trying to be funny all the time. He does put things in an interesting way. We were talking about going on vacations, and I said, you ought to go to try Yellowstone. Yellowstone's great. So I was thinking about maybe I'd take the kids to China. And his world is different from my world. But one of his, probably his best friend, a man named Van Schley, was one of the owners in these things with me. And Van and I have remained friends. And so I've been able to keep in touch, not only with Bill, but with his brother, Brian Doyle. Who wrote Caddyshack.
Yes.
And I've played golf with Brian Doyle Murray.
But you
And
haven't
now-
played
now
golf
I
with
play
me
golf
at the
with you.
country
Well,
club.
Did you write Caddyshack? I mean, if you,
No. As you well know, I have my own novel I've written. It's available on Amazon.
what's it called?
It's called Plateau.
Is it a breathless telling
It's
of a
it's
romance?
it's a mystery adventure. It has a little bit
All
of
right.
romance in it.
I'm gonna find it. I'm writing it down right here, right here, right here, right here.
Just remember, you have to spell my name with a C. If you put Amazon
Yeah,
Mark Hunter Plateau, it'll show
I
up.
realize that you're not a real Mark because you use a C. You're one of those effete, impudent snobs that they used to talk about in the 60s.
Exactly. You can blame my father for that.
I loved your dad. I knew your dad.
Yeah.
You've written something. You sent me something about what's the favorite part of my job, and
Yes.
I would have to say that the favorite part of my job is all of the people that I've gotten to know, and that I work with at the association. They are, without question, honest, forthright, friendly, available, and they're like you. I mean, you and I, we have common friends,
Yes.
but we get along really well, and it's easy to do. There's never any friction with it, and I have really loved that. Now, did you want me to pick somebody to be the new executive director, or you said here 2 suggestions for a new AD?
No. What I meant by that is, from your perspective as the lead attorney for the association for so many years, if you had 2 items that you could share with a new athletic director between 1 and 4 years, someone who's brand new in their profession, not someone from the AD end, but someone from the professional end, from the JD end, where you're coming from. If you could tell this AD, you need to absolutely do these 2 things to be a success, what 2 things would those be from your perspective?
I think you have to know the rules, right? And the second thing would be to understand that if you have an issue you don't fully understand, you could call the association and they'll help you. And there's no reason just to pretend that you know all of it. So those 2 things, that would really make a difference, I think. So sometimes when we start out in a new job, we don't want anyone to know that we don't know what we're doing. But I don't know, maybe we
don't know what we don't know.
Yeah, maybe we never know what we're doing, but so that would be Yep.
All right, well, let's finish up with this. And of course, I plagiarized this from Dan Rather, and I'm upfront about it. What question?
Wait, you typed the wrong thing? You typed up something fake?
No.
Oh, sorry.
What question should I have asked you that I failed to ask you? I got this when I saw one of his interviews with the Doobie Brothers, and that's how he failed. He actually said the same thing to Crosby, Stills, and Nash when I saw it. So I'm asking you, what question should I have asked you that I failed to ask you?
Did you always want to be a lawyer?
Actually, when I was younger, I wanted to be a lawyer.
Okay. Well, that's the question. Now I've asked you, and you should have been.
So did you want to always be a lawyer?
I kind of thought I would, although there was a point at which I thought I might want to try to be a professional musician. And my dad, who'd been one, told me don't do that.
Said it's going to be a more difficult road than being an attorney.
Well, not necessarily more difficult, but he said there's one thing for which you have you've been given a gift, so don't look away from it. So that was what I did. He was smart.
Very good. Anything else you want to share with our audience before we wrap this up?
I appreciate all your work. You've been here for years. Thanks, Mark. Thanks for having me on. You have me on sometime, we'll talk about something controversial.
Well, we'll have, I think you're scheduled, this will come out probably sometime the first part of February.
Okay.
I'd like to record them in advance, but that again wraps it up for another edition of the UIAAA Connection. Again, our guest has been Mark VanWagoner, Head Legal Counsel for the Utah High School Activities Association. Thanks, Mark, for being part of the broadcast.
Thank you, Mark, with a C. See you soon.
And for our listeners, we hope you tune in again next week for another edition of the UIAAA Connection.